Crime and Crime Again is a true crime podcast containing subject matter that may be graphic or disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Hundreds of thousands of people go missing in the United States every year. In 2021, more than 500,000 people were reported missing. More often than not, those who are reported missing are quickly found, but there are a number of people who never make it home. Typically, when someone disappears, their family and friends are diligent in reporting their disappearance quickly and bringing them back home within a few days or weeks. But what happens when a family doesn't know that their loved one is missing? What happens when someone suddenly vanishes, but none of their family or friends even know that they're a missing person for several years? This is one such story. This is the case of Dana Pastori. In October 1992, 26-year-old Dana Pastori seemed to be living, by all accounts, a happy, comfortable life. At the time, she was married with 2 daughters and was working a job she enjoyed at a restaurant in Pensacola, Florida. But it was around that time in her life that she was becoming disillusioned with the path her life had taken, and her marriage started to unravel. That may have all started when, in the fall of 1992, Dana received a phone call she never expected that made her reevaluate her circumstances and where she truly wanted to be in life. Dana's mother had an affair that resulted in her pregnancy with Dana. Because of the circumstances, Dana never knew her biological father. That was until he called her in the fall of 1992 when she was 26 years old. I can imagine this turned her life a bit sideways. Dana discovered that she had a half-brother and 2 half-sisters, and one of those sisters wanted to meet her. Her half-sister, Kathy, ended up driving from South Carolina to Pensacola, Florida to meet Dana for the first time. The two grew close rather quickly. They had more than 2 decades worth of their lives to catch each other up on, and they made the most of their time together. It wasn't long before Dana expressed to her sister Kathy that she was no longer happy in her marriage. According to Kathy, Dana felt that her beliefs and aspirations didn't align at all with her husband's. She felt that her husband had never truly understood or supported her. Dana practiced paganism. She believed in and communed with Norse deities, and had an altar at home where she practiced rituals, even performing a fertility ritual for one of her friends at one point. Dana had also started learning to read tarot cards, and would do readings for her friends. Of course, everyone has their own beliefs and spiritual practices. But it can be difficult when your partner isn't understanding of your beliefs, or when they're perhaps even averse to them, as Dana's husband seemed to be. Dana felt stifled and stuck. She didn't feel that she was where she truly wanted to be. Eventually, in 1994, Dana separated from her husband and wanted to move to a new city where she felt she could find community and more freely express her spirituality. This led Dana to New Orleans, Louisiana. She fell in love with New Orleans, but there was one thing missing: her daughters. Dana wanted to get on her feet and settle into her new life, but she planned on bringing her daughters to New Orleans once she'd started rebuilding a life for herself. But when her divorce was finalized in 1995, Dana was dealt a heavy blow. Her ex-husband was granted custody of their 2 daughters. Despite this, Dana was still able to talk on the phone with her daughters frequently, and regularly got to visit them. She did want to keep fighting for custody, but at that point, the odds just weren't in her favor. In December 1995, during one of those visits where her daughters were staying with her, Dana noticed things about her girls that concerned her. She saw bruises on both of her daughters and noted that they seemed anxious and didn't want to return home. Shortly thereafter, in January 1996, Dana took the girls to be evaluated by a psychologist, who determined that both girls were likely being subjected to corporal punishment and were frightened about returning home. Fearful that even with the psychologist's report, a custody battle could take several months and still not end in her favor, Dana chose instead to take her daughters on the run. Dana's ex-husband quickly hired a private investigator to track her down and bring his daughters back to him. Dana and the girls moved from city to city, trying to stay off the radar of police and with the intention of eventually crossing the border into Canada. They moved to places like Ohio, New Orleans, Seattle, and even spent time in Mexico and Puerto Rico. During all of that time, the girls were not enrolled in school, and at that point, Dana was wanted for kidnapping. She regularly called her sister Kathy from payphones to let her know that she and the girls were safe, but never told Kathy exactly where she was. But on Christmas Day 1996, Dana called her father, Peter Surratt, who she had reconnected with just a few years earlier. Dana was unsure of what she should do, and her father, Peter, was a former police chief. She knew that police were close to tracking her down, and she also knew that her daughters would be taken from her once again. But she relented, following her father's advice. Dana was arrested and brought to Dayton, Ohio, where her ex-husband lived with his new wife. Her father ended up pulling many strings and was able to have Dana released into his custody until her trial. Dana's daughters were initially placed in foster care while the allegations of abuse against her ex-husband and his new wife were investigated. The girls were returned to their father in early January 1997. 6 months after her arrest, Dana was sentenced to 2 years of probation. Although she wanted to keep fighting for custody of her girls, Dana knew that she once again needed to get back on her feet, save up some money, and try to hire a lawyer. She decided to move back to a city she loved, New Orleans. There, Dana started doing tarot card readings in Jackson Square, hoping to start building a savings and start rebuilding her life. It was while she was doing tarot readings that she met up with an old friend and someone she had briefly dated from the first time she lived in New Orleans, a man named John Morgan. John worked the graveyard shift as a delivery driver at the Quartermaster Deli in the French Quarter, and he also did tarot readings on the side, which is where he reconnected with Dana. Dana felt an instant connection with John. They shared many of the same beliefs, and she felt that he understood her. The pair started dating, and John was able to help Dana get a job as a cashier at the Quartermaster Deli where he worked. Later, in the fall of 2000, Dana agreed to move in with John, so they rented out a small apartment together on Ursulines Avenue. Around that time, Dana started pursuing another aspiration, writing a memoir about her life. She had dreams of someday traveling to Europe to put pen to paper and write a book. But for the time being, she was content with staying in New Orleans. She continued working the graveyard shift with John at the Quartermaster Deli and doing tarot readings in the city, but never forgot those dreams that she truly wanted to pursue. On March 15, 2002, almost 2 years after she started dating John, Dana put in her 2 weeks' notice at the deli and told her coworkers she was packing up to leave New Orleans. At that time, Dana was 39 years old, and after 4 years in the Big Easy, she was ready to move on. But after putting in her notice, Dana suddenly stopped showing up to work. Her coworkers tried to call her landline at the apartment she shared with John, but neither Dana nor John ever picked up the phone. The day after Dana stopped showing up to work, John showed up for his shift with news about Dana. He informed their coworkers that Dana had been in a serious car accident and was in the ICU. Her coworkers were eager to visit her and see that she was okay, but John told them that she wasn't allowed to have visitors besides him. After that, John would update his coworkers daily on his visits with Dana and how she was doing in the hospital. According to John's coworkers, it was around that time that John's personality started to shift. They already knew him as an arrogant, controlling man, but they started noticing behaviors that indicated to them that John, a frequent marijuana smoker, had likely started doing harder drugs, namely cocaine. His coworkers also recalled witnessing more than one heated argument between John and Dana while they were at work at the deli. On top of that, John was known to berate Dana at work for all of their coworkers to see. Several coworkers suspected that John was abusing Dana, but they were never able to definitively prove it. After a few weeks of offering updates about Dana's hospital stay, John started telling people at the deli that Dana's parents had come to New Orleans to move her back home with them to South Carolina. And soon after that, he told people that Dana had made a full recovery and that her parents had helped her travel to Prague, in the Czech Republic, to pursue her dreams of traveling and writing her memoir. Eventually, John informed their coworkers that Dana would not be returning to New Orleans. She'd fallen in love with Prague and decided to stay there. Meanwhile, after several weeks of not hearing from Dana and not being able to get in touch with her, her sister Kathy finally got an answer from John. He told Kathy on the phone that he and Dana had just been incredibly busy with work and hadn't had much downtime, but that Dana was doing fine. Kathy was told an entirely different story than what John had told Dana's coworkers and friends in New Orleans. Kathy lived in South Carolina, so she was none the wiser. Shortly after receiving that phone call from John, Kathy started receiving emails from Dana, updating her on her life and letting her know that everything was fine. And with that, Kathy believed that Dana was safe and well and just living her life in New Orleans. But 3 years later, everyone's beliefs about what became of Dana Pastori would be shattered. On August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall in the Gulf Coast, and New Orleans was descended into absolute devastation. The floodwalls and levees designed to mitigate the effects of severe flooding failed to a catastrophic degree. Floodwaters breached the 17th Street, London, and Industrial canals, and these breaches were later found to be the primary cause of most of the disastrous flooding throughout the city. After the worst of the storm had passed, 80% of New Orleans was flooded, with some parts of the city being submerged in up to 15 feet of water. Between 80 and 90% of the residents in the city had been evacuated before the hurricane hit, but many were unable to leave. The Louisiana Superdome should have played a huge role in housing those who weren't able to evacuate. But on August 30th, 2005, Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco ordered the Superdome to be evacuated due to structural damage, and evacuees were then transported to the Astrodome in Houston, Texas. Many rooftops throughout the city poked out from several feet of floodwaters, dotted with stranded residents trying to escape the waters and await rescue. By 11 p.m. on August 29, 2005, the mayor of New Orleans at the time reported a significant loss of life. Bodies were floating in the floodwaters across the city. There was no clean water available to those who were stranded. Power outages lasted several weeks after the hurricane. This also affected communications, with cell service and internet lines left damaged. As a result, communications during rescue and relief efforts were difficult. On September 9, 2005, operations began to recover bodies throughout the city. There were 392 recorded deaths that occurred as a direct result of the hurricane. The death toll that indirectly resulted from the hurricane itself is officially unknown. As Dana's family watched news coverage of Hurricane Katrina from their homes in South Carolina, they grew increasingly concerned. Dana had not reached out to them, even before the storm hit. But they waited it out, assuming that Dana hadn't called because she wasn't able to. With the power outages and lack of cellular service in the city, it seemed likely that Dana just didn't yet have a way to contact them. But 2 months after Hurricane Katrina hit, Dana's family still had not heard from her. At that point, they felt that something was wrong. Her family remembered that Dana relied on medication for glaucoma, so they decided to find out when Dana last filled her prescription. They contacted law enforcement in New Orleans and an officer visited the pharmacy where Dana would get her prescription. It turned out that she hadn't gotten a refill since late 2001, 4 years earlier. Alarmed, Dana's father, Peter Surratt, called John Morgan, hoping he would have information about his daughter's whereabouts. But John told Peter that when Dana received her relief check from FEMA, she decided to go to Europe, and he hadn't heard from her. Yet another inconsistent story spun by John Morgan. By October 2005, there were 7,000 people reported as missing after the hurricane, and in the following months, that number reached 13,000 people. Dana's family feared that Dana was among those missing as a result of the hurricane. On October 21, 2005, Detective Greg Hamilton with the New Orleans Police Department received a call about a body found in a storage trunk in someone's home after the hurricane. Detective Hamilton arrived at a home on Elysian Fields Avenue in New Orleans and was met by the homeowners, Rodney and Kathleen. The couple explained that they were cleaning out their home after the hurricane when they discovered a large, locked storage trunk made of particle board in a storage room in their home. They pulled the trunk outside onto neutral ground, where other residents in the area were dumping debris from the storm. They got the trunk open and tipped it over to look over the contents. They were horrified when they saw what appeared to be a partially mummified body fall out of the trunk. Also inside the trunk was a white sheet, a white towel, a pair of socks, a pair of underwear, sweatpants, and a curling iron. The cord of the curling iron was wrapped and knotted around the neck of the body in the trunk. On the partially mummified body was a bra, a t-shirt with a Lake City Police Department logo, a blue button-up sweatshirt, and green shorts. The body had been dismembered. There was a cut near the navel, the legs had been cut at the knees, and the arms had been cut from the torso. When asked where the trunk came from, Rodney and Kathleen told the detective that the trunk was stored in their home by their daughter's boyfriend. Their daughter Tracy and her boyfriend received relief checks from FEMA and moved out of the home. The boyfriend left several of his belongings in the storage room when they left. When Rodney and Kathleen called Tracy, her boyfriend told them he didn't want any of the belongings he left behind, and told them just to throw them away. Rodney and Kathleen also found a small lockbox in the apartment where their daughter and her boyfriend lived. Inside the lockbox was a driver's license belonging to Dana Surratt. Surratt was Dana's maiden name. Along with the driver's license, police found Dana's passport and social security card, birth certificates belonging to both Dana and her daughters, a credit card belonging to Dana, and a probation letter. When police asked for the identity of the boyfriend, Rodney and Kathleen told them his name was John Morgan. Meanwhile, a tooth from the body inside the trunk was sent off to the FBI for testing to begin the process of officially identifying the body. Because of the documents police found in the lockbox that belonged to Dana Pastori, and because they weren't able to locate or contact her, they contacted Dana's mother to ask for a sample of DNA to compare with the tooth from the body. It would be almost 2 years before the official results would come back. None of Dana's family or friends even knew that she was a missing person. Her family was under the impression that she was doing well in New Orleans and had been emailing back and forth with her sister Kathy. Dana's coworkers all believed that she had moved to Prague after recovering from a car accident. After more than 3 years of not seeing Dana or speaking to her over the phone, her family and friends were now getting closer to the truth. While awaiting DNA results on the body found inside the trunk, Detective Hamilton continued speaking with people who had known John Morgan. And because of the documents found in the lockbox that appeared to belong to Dana Pastori, he wanted to know more about her relationship with John. In November 2005, Detective Hamilton located John Morgan in Mecklenburg, North Carolina, where he had moved with Tracy after the hurricane hit. In November 2005, Detective Hamilton asked police in Mecklenburg, North Carolina, to locate John Morgan and interview him about Dana Pastori. When police made contact with John, he seemed cooperative and willing to speak with them. He was shown a photograph of the trunk that Dana's body was found in, and he denied that it belonged to him. John told police that he and Dana had not been getting along well, and that in July of 2002, Dana broke up with him and left. He told police that 2 weeks after Dana left, he received a postcard from her to let him know that she was doing well. John Morgan actually did agree to submit 2 DNA samples to police. Almost 2 years later, in July 2007, Detective Hamilton received the news he had long been waiting for. The body found inside the trunk was positively identified as Dana Pastori. A few months later, a warrant was issued for John Morgan's arrest. On February 8, 2008, John Morgan was arrested and charged with the murder of Dana Pastori. The arrest came nearly 6 years after Dana disappeared. During his initial interrogation, John told police that he had struggled with substance abuse for a long time. Most of his money went toward drugs, which caused many arguments between him and Dana. He told police that his relationship with Dana was rocky and that they didn't get along well. John stated during his interrogation that sometime around Mardi Gras in 2002, which would be between February and March, Dana broke up with him and moved out, and he never saw her again. This was not consistent with the statement he voluntarily provided 2 years earlier, when he told police that Dana left him sometime in July 2002. John Morgan initially denied having seen or moved Dana's body after she was killed, but his story continued changing. Eventually, John told police that it was actually his drug dealer, someone he referred to as Pepper, that killed Dana because she had supposedly ratted him out to the cops. According to John, Pepper then ordered him to find somewhere to store her body. John claimed that he himself put Dana into the storage trunk, even describing how he dismembered her body because it wouldn't fit in the trunk. But he continued to deny killing her, sticking with his story that Pepper the drug dealer was the one who murdered Dana. Police could not corroborate this statement and could not locate anyone by the alias of Pepper. John was ultimately charged with second-degree murder and remained in jail to await his trial. And in July 2009, John Morgan's trial began. Several witnesses were called to the stand to testify. One of those witnesses was a woman named Maria, the landlord of the apartment that John and Dana shared. Maria actually lived in another part of the house while renting out the apartment in a separate part of the house. Maria testified that she rented out the apartment to John Morgan and Dana Pastori beginning sometime in late 2000. Sometime in mid-2002, she noticed that Dana was no longer around and she hadn't seen her in a while. When Maria asked John Morgan where Dana had gone, he told her, just as he had told coworkers at the deli, that Dana had gotten into a car accident and had relocated to South Carolina to be with her family while she recovered. On other occasions when Maria asked about Dana, John told her that Dana had fully recovered and decided to stay in South Carolina, where she'd gotten a job as a dispatcher. According to Maria, John Morgan lived in the apartment alone until October 2003, when another woman moved in with him. Several months later, a different woman moved in with John. That woman was Tracy. John and Tracy lived in the apartment until October 2004, when they moved into an apartment on Tracy's parents' property on Elysian Fields Avenue. In November 2004, Maria was coming home one day when she noticed an incredibly foul odor coming from the house. It appeared to be coming from some garbage outside of the home. When the garbage collectors came to the house that day, she looked closer at the contents and noticed a Tupperware dish containing what she described as yellow and similar to chicken fat. She stated that this container smelled absolutely foul. Shortly after garbage collection arrived, John Morgan also turned up. When Maria asked him what was in his garbage, he explained that it was just a dead rat. Of course, Maria did not believe him, but she gave him a trash bag and told him to get rid of it. At one point, Maria saw John moving some belongings out of the apartment, including a large storage trunk. She recalled a foul odor coming from all of John's belongings, including that trunk. After John had moved out of the apartment, Maria went into the apartment to start removing the belongings he left behind, and when she did, she smelled the same strong, disgusting odor. She inspected further and noticed that the smells seemed to be coming from a small crawl space in the kitchen. Inside the crawl space, she found rolled up rugs that had a quote-unquote thick, gooey substance on them, and the odor was so foul that Maria could hardly stand it for more than a few seconds. Maria testified that it took more than 2 years to completely remove the odor from the house. Testing of that crawl space in the kitchen did not reveal any conclusive results about whether the substance was blood or other human remains. Rodney and Kathleen both also testified at the trial. Rodney testified that he had rented out a second-floor apartment of his house to Tracy and John, while he and Kathleen lived in a townhouse at the back of the property. The ground-floor apartment of the house was used as a storage room, where John stored the 2 large trunks when he moved in. Rodney stated that after placing the trunks in the storage room, John never had access to the room and Rodney possessed the only key. The storage room was always kept locked until October 2005, when it was cleaned out after Hurricane Katrina. Rodney also testified that the storage trunks had a strong, foul odor coming from them that he attempted to get rid of, to no avail. Kathleen testified that she had heard John Morgan talk about Dana Pastori, but that she had never met her. She stated that John would say terrible things about Dana and told Rodney and Kathleen that Dana had moved to Czechoslovakia. Ultimately, the trial lasted 3 days, and on July 29, 2009, the jury deliberated for only 40 minutes before returning and finding John Morgan guilty of the second-degree murder of Dana Pastori. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was determined that Dana was likely strangled with the cord of her curling iron before being dismembered and placed in the storage trunk. For more than 3 years, Dana Pastori's family and friends lived under the impression that Dana was safe and well, and was just going through life trying to follow her aspirations. It wasn't until mass tragedy struck New Orleans in 2005 that the truth of what became of Dana Pastori was uncovered. Never did they imagine that their daughter, sister, mother, and friend was murdered, hidden away in a storage trunk for all that time. Dana's story is one that I haven't seen much coverage on, but I do feel that her story matters and deserves to be told. If you'd like to request a case to be covered on the show, you'll find a link to a case request form in the show notes. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, where you'll find full episodes, complete with photos relevant to each case. You can follow the podcast on X, formerly Twitter, @CrimeAgainPod, on Instagram @CrimeAgainPodcast, and on TikTok @CrimeAgainPodcast. Links to all social media can be found in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Crime and Crime Again.